You know, usually when we talk about a high-performance machine, there's this underlying expectation of just flawless execution. Like, think of a Formula One car,
Well,
right?
right, yeah, the absolute peak of engineering.
Exactly. You put it on a perfectly paved track, you get the
Yeah.
tires warm to that, like, exact optimal degree. The wind conditions are just so, and it glides. I mean, it is a marvel of engineering that practically defies the laws of physics.
Yeah, but, well, the hidden caveat there is how heavily that performance relies on environmental compliance. Like, a machine calibrated for absolute perfection is often only perfect within, highly specific, incredibly narrow parameters.
Right. Which brings up a really fascinating mental image. Just imagine taking that multi-million-dollar, meticulously engineered Formula One car and dropping it into the middle of a dense, muddy swamp.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a disaster waiting to happen.
Right. Suddenly, all of that precision engineering actively works against the machine.
Hmm.
The slick tires just spin out in the mud, the low clearance gets it instantly high-centered, the engine overheats trying to compensate, and, this vehicle that was supposed to be completely unstoppable is just totally paralyzed.
It becomes the textbook definition of a catastrophic system failure. I mean, the engineering didn't disappear, the context just rendered it completely useless.
Exactly. And welcome to the deep dive. Today is June 15th, 2026, and we are looking at the biggest shockwave currently rippling through the 2026 FIFA World Cup.
It's a huge war.
It really is. We are unpacking the staggering 0-0 draw between the reigning European giants, Spain, and the absolute tournament debutantes, Cape Verde, a team affectionately known to their fans as the Blue Sharks.
Yeah, and this result has completely upended the entire narrative of the group stages. It forces a fundamental reevaluation of the tournament favorites, honestly.
Totally. So our mission today is to untangle the core debate surrounding this specific 90 minutes of football. We're using an analytical breakdown titled "The Blue Sharks Blunt the Spanish Sword" as our main source. And we really want to look at whether this match was a legendary tactical defensive masterclass by Cape Verde, or, if we witnessed a monumental physical and psychological collapse by an overly confident Spanish side.
Well, history usually shows us that in these monumental sporting upsets, you rarely get one without the other. It's a complex collision of preparation meeting opportunity, or in this case, unpreparedness meeting an incredibly disciplined underdog.
Right. And for anyone captivated by the mechanics of sports, whether you're a diehard soccer tactician or just someone fascinated by the psychology of a classic David versus Goliath scenario, this match is a masterclass
It really is.
because it demonstrates how supposedly flawless systems can completely disintegrate under the wrong conditions. So let's start with the physical reality of the environment, because the weather in North America this summer is not just a backdrop. It is the crucible of this entire match.
Oh, absolutely.
We are talking about a historic, extreme summer heat wave paired with just suffocating heavy humidity.
Yeah, the meteorological data from the pitch level is staggering. We are looking at conditions where sweat simply does not evaporate. And to understand why that dictates a soccer match, we actually have to look at the central nervous system.
Wait, really? The central nervous system?
Yeah, exactly. When the body cannot cool itself through evaporation, core temperatures spike. So the brain's natural defense mechanism is to actually throttle muscle recruitment to prevent heat stroke.
Wow, which is a massive problem when your entire tactical identity is based on relentless high-speed motion. I mean, the Spain's signature style, tiki-taka, is often misunderstood as just passing the ball back and forth.
Right, people think it's just playing keep away.
Exactly. But it actually requires constant, rapid off-the-ball movement. Like, if a player has the ball, two other players have to instantly sprint into open space to create a passing triangle. You pass, you sprint, you recalibrate. It just never stops.
And crucially, it requires the high press. In Spain's system, the moment they lose possession, they don't retreat.
They just swarm, right?
Exactly. The entire team must sprint simultaneously toward the ball carrier to win it back within a window of about 3 to 5 seconds. It is a synchronized, high-intensity swarm.
Man, trying to execute that in an extreme heat wave is like trying to execute a fast-paced ballet in a swamp. I mean, by the 30th minute of this match, the Spanish players were visibly drained. You could literally see them hunched over during stoppages, just gasping for air.
Yeah, it was hard to watch.
Their faces were flushed, their reaction times were delayed. So I have to ask, is a system so reliant on constant motion just fundamentally flawed when forced into extreme climates?
Well, the physiology explains the visual evidence you just mentioned. In extreme heat and high humidity, the body's ability to clear lactic acid and resupply oxygen to fast-twitch muscle fibers is severely compromised.
So they literally just can't recover fast enough.
Exactly. Transition recovery time, which is the seconds it takes for a player's muscles to recover after a sprint, stretches out dramatically. So executing a synchronized high press doesn't just become difficult. Mathematically and physiologically, it becomes impossible.
Wow.
Yeah, the muscles simply cannot perform the required rapid contractions fast enough to close the distance.
And Cape Verde clearly understood this biological limitation. They didn't try to match Spain's technical ability. They bet against Spain's physiological endurance.
Which was incredibly smart.
Right. They knew the European giants wouldn't be able to sustain the physical requirements of their own tactical identity.
Yeah, the environment was the catalyst. It initiated a physical sluggishness that seamlessly transitioned into a profound psychological shift. And this brings us to the mechanics of the low block defense and how physical exhaustion dictates mental decision-making.
Yeah, because Spain could no longer sprint, their entire passing game mutated. I mean, from the opening whistle, their passing was slow, it was lateral, moving endlessly from left to right with a total lack of verticality.
They rarely attempted to pierce through Cape Verde's lines.
Exactly. And the prevailing narrative out there right now is that this was the classic underestimation trap. Like, Spain exuded this aura of overconfidence. They played casually,
Yeah.
passing the ball around as if they genuinely believed a goal would eventually materialize out of thin air simply because of their reputation.
And that lack of urgency is oxygen for an underdog. When the attacking team refuses to force the issue, a team like Cape Verde can comfortably settle into their defensive shape, conserve their own energy, and just build immense confidence minute by minute.
I do want to push back a little on that prevailing narrative of pure Spanish arrogance, though.
Okay, what are you thinking?
Was their casual body language and slow tempo genuinely a product of hubris? Or was it actually a psychological defense mechanism? Like, were they masking their complete inability to physically sprint by pretending they were just methodically controlling the tempo?
Oh, that is a really fascinating psychological distinction. And it is highly likely a feedback loop of both. Consider how top-tier athletes operate. They possess enormous egos and reputations to protect on the global stage,
Right. They aren't going to just admit they're tired.
Exactly. When they encounter physical impotence, when their legs simply will not do what their brain commands, cognitive dissonance sets in.
So they rationalize it. They tell themselves, we aren't tired, we're just being patient.
Exactly that mechanism. Because they couldn't sprint to create dynamic passing lanes, they rationalized playing a slow, lateral game. And because they are a team composed of global superstars, their collective psychology tricked them into believing this static possession was completely under their control.
But the tactical reality was totally different.
Right, much harsher. A low block defense involves a team dropping all 10 outfield players deep into their own defensive third, compressing the playable space to maybe 30 yards.
It just shrinks the field. The distance between the Cape Verde defenders becomes almost microscopic.
And a low block only survives if the attacking team is predictable. The entire goal of dynamic attacking football is to pull defenders out of those tight, organized positions. You use speed and chaos to force a center back to step forward, which leaves a gap behind him.
But by playing slow, lateral passes, Spain gave Cape Verde the ultimate gift, absolute predictability.
Exactly.
The Blue Sharks never had to chase shadows or make desperate lunges. They could just shift side to side as a single, organized organism. They essentially allowed Spain to pass the ball harmlessly 30 yards away from the goal, knowing the extreme heat was doing the heavy lifting of exhausting the Spanish midfield.
Yeah, and as Cape Verde's defensive fortress solidified, the psychological pressure naturally rebounded back onto Spain. Because when a team holds 75% possession but creates zero scoring chances, the frustration compounds exponentially. Which leads us directly to the complete short-circuiting of the Spanish engine room.
Oh man, the midfield collapse was truly jarring to watch. We have to zoom in on two specific players to understand the magnitude of the system failure, starting with Rodri.
Right? The anchor.
Yeah, we are talking about the metronome of the Spanish national team. He is the pivot, the player who dictates the tempo, receives the ball under pressure, and connects the defense to the attack. Yet, in a highly unusual move, the manager substituted him off around the 80th minute.
Removing a player of his caliber in the final 10 minutes of a deadlock match is incredibly telling. You do not remove your primary distributor when you are desperately searching for a winning goal unless the tactical engine is entirely flooded.
Yeah, he looked physically spent and completely out of ideas. He was no longer capable of tracking back to stop Cape Verde's quick counterattacks, so taking him off felt less like a strategic tweak and more like the manager waving a white flag on the world stage, admitting that their core midfield strategy had completely stalled.
It is an admission of systemic defeat. Rodri relies on angles and options. When his teammates are totally static due to the heat, he receives the ball and looks up to find no passing lanes. The geometry of the pitch just collapses in on him.
Which brings us to Pedri, their creative maestro. He was totally neutralized from the first minute to the last. Cape Verde applied tight, intensely physical marking specifically tailored to his zones.
They gave him no room to breathe.
None at all. And this all culminated in a sloppy, desperate, uncharacteristic challenge by Pedri late in the game that earned him a yellow card. To me, that yellow card transcends a routine foul. It is the perfect cinematic symbol for Spain's collective psychological breakdown and frustration in those final minutes.
Frustration is the inevitable byproduct of impotence, really. Pedri is a player who thrives in the half spaces, those tiny pockets of turf between the opponent's midfield line and their defensive line. He only needs a fraction of a second to turn and create a goal.
Right. He's a genius in those tight areas.
But Cape Verde, by maintaining that rigid, deep, low block, simply deleted those half spaces from the pitch.
So every time he received the ball, there wasn't just one defender. There were instantly 3 blue shirts collapsing his personal space.
The geometry of the low block dictates exactly that. When a genius-level creator realizes his elite tools have been rendered entirely useless by an opponent he likely deemed inferior before kickoff, the mental toll is heavy. That sloppy tackle you mentioned wasn't about winning the ball back. It was the physical manifestation of a broken system violently snapping.
Wow. So we arrive at the final act of this match. The midfield is suffocating. The heat is unbearable. Time is rapidly running out, and Spain desperately needs to introduce chaos to break Cape Verde's rigid structure.
Right, they need a spark.
Exactly. And this brings us to the most heavily debated tactical decision of the tournament so far, the handling of Lamine Yamal.
The timing of his introduction is a fascinating case study in game management and, frankly, the misunderstanding of team dynamics.
Yeah, the manager makes the fateful decision to bench Yamal, who is, a teenager widely regarded as a generational explosive talent, in favor of a much more traditional structured front line.
Presumably to save his legs for later.
Right. The assumption was likely to rest him in the heat or use him as a devastating impact substitute later in the match. But he doesn't bring Yamal onto the pitch until roughly the 65th or 70th minute. Against a deeply entrenched, compact, low block, that just seems like a massive miscalculation. You need an explosive, unpredictable dribbler from minute 1 to stretch those tight defensive lines.
Yeah, deploying an impact substitute only works if the environment they are entering can actually support them. It relies on a fundamental misunderstanding of the pitch geometry to think one isolated player can fix a completely static team.
It makes me think of keeping a crowbar in your toolbox when you are locked out of your house, but stubbornly refusing to use it until the door hinges have completely rusted shut.
That's a great way to put it.
Right. You literally gave Cape Verde over an hour to get completely comfortable, to map out the pitch, and to perfectly synchronize their defensive shifting. And what happens when Yamal finally steps onto the grass? He is instantly double and triple teamed.
Taking your crowbar analogy a step further, even if you finally bring out the tool, a crowbar still requires leverage to pry a door open. Yamal had zero leverage because the surrounding Spanish system had no energy left to support him.
Because no one else is moving to pull defenders away.
Precisely the issue. If you introduce a highly dynamic, unpredictable winger into a team that is otherwise completely stationary, you haven't created a multi-pronged attack. You have simply placed a giant neon sign over the exact spot where the defense needs to focus all of its attention.
Normally, if Yamal has the ball on the wing, the Spanish fullback, someone like Dani Carvajal or Grimaldo, would make a blistering, overlapping run behind him.
And that overlapping run forces the defending winger to make a choice. Like, do I stay and help double team Yamal, or do I track the fullback running past me? It creates a dilemma.
Right.
But because Spain's fullbacks were completely exhausted by the 70th minute, those overlapping runs simply stopped happening.
So the dilemma disappears. The Cape Verde defenders realize they can safely abandon their designated zones because there are no secondary runners to punish them for it. They can just swarm Yamal without consequence.
Exactly. He became a single point of failure for the entire Spanish attack. The manager attempted to inject chaos to shatter the defensive structure, but it was a fatal miscalculation of when to deploy their most lethal weapon.
It was just way too late.
Yeah, by the time Yamal arrived, Cape Verde's defensive rhythm was deeply entrenched, and Spain's overall energy was entirely depleted. Yamal was effectively stranded on an island, isolated by a disciplined defense that recognized he was the only remaining threat.
So as we look at the remainder of this World Cup, the implications of this 0-0 draw are just massive. We are left with an incredible dual narrative here.
We really are.
On one hand, you have Cape Verde's astonishing veteran-level organization. They completely defied their status as tournament debutantes, acclimatizing beautifully to brutal conditions and executing a defensive masterclass with remarkable discipline.
They proved that physiological endurance and structural discipline can neutralize technical superiority.
Which is an amazing story. But on the other hand, it is a glaring, flashing red warning sign for Spain.
Yeah.
It exposes a severe vulnerability to extreme weather conditions, and it highlights a dangerous psychological habit of underestimating lower-ranked opponents until it is too late to change the tempo of the match.
And the lingering question that defines the rest of their campaign is whether they possess the tactical flexibility to adapt.
And that is the exact thought you need to chew on as this tournament progresses. If a team from a small island nation can completely nullify a metronome like Rodri, freeze a creative genius like Pedri, and isolate a generational threat like Lamine Yamal just by enduring the heat and maintaining a rigid defensive block, I mean, does Spain actually have a plan B for the rest of this World Cup?
It's hard to say, and the broader consequence is that the blueprint is now out there for the entire world to study. Every future opponent is analyzing this tape, looking at exactly how a supposedly perfect system shatters under specific atmospheric and tactical pressures.
Which brings us all the way back to our Formula One car stuck in the mud. It leaves us with a provocative concept to mull over before the next match. Now that the Blue Sharks have successfully broadcasted this exact blueprint to the world, how will future opponents try to replicate it?
They absolutely will try.
Right. And does absolute commitment to a quote-unquote perfect system actually make a team fundamentally more fragile when the environment refuses to cooperate? When the track isn't paved and the weather is hostile, is it better to be a perfectly tuned machine that only works in ideal conditions, or a highly adaptable survivor capable of winning ugly? It is definitely something to keep a close eye on the next time you see a heavy favorite step onto the pitch.